From the 2016 Ohioana Book Festival, this is Craft. I'm Doug Dangler, and I'm very pleased to be sitting here with John Scalzi, author John Scalzi, and welcome to Craft.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, you are living in Ohio and welcomed at Ohio and known for your books that span the universe. So
some of them, though, which reference Ohio. Old Man's War starts off in Bradford, Ohio, which is where I happen to live. So.
Okay, all right. When you write about Bradford, Ohio, how much have you had to do research? You're like, I'm sorry, I can't do the dishes tonight. I have to go research Bradford.
I really have to. It's been really intensive. The way that I've done it is, I didn't want to just sort of, it's not just a spot in the map. I wanted to actually feel what it was like to be in Bradford, and that's why I've lived there for the last 15 years.
Okay, so when it features in a story, what kind of things do you get to pull out of it that people living there or in Ohio could recognize and say?
One of the things is just simply the fact that it's in Ohio at all. I mean, Ohio is not generally considered to be one of the major literary highlights of the United States, unfairly, I would say. But the fact of, I've had people who was like, I opened up the book and I was reading it, and it was in Bradford, Ohio, and I used to live in Greenville, which is of course the county seat, and I was stunned that anybody even knew that it existed. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think it's unfair. I mean, of course, Ohio has a huge literary tradition, so you have, Thurber, you have
O. Henry,
you have Sherwood Anderson,
who we incarcerated.
Right. Not to brag.
But all of our best authors are somewhere in prison. That's
right.
Not true.
Yeah.
But we also the Shawshank Redemption was filmed.
Yes.
At the Mansfield Reformatory, and that was well-regarded literary.
Yeah.
So nicely done there.
Yes.
So what are some of the next things that you've got coming up? What are your plans for the future?
The next thing that I have is actually going to be an audio book first before it is in print. It's a novella which is called The Dispatcher, and it is my first attempt at urban fantasy. And often I think when people think of urban fantasy, they think of vampires in New York or something like that. And there are no vampires. It takes place in Chicago, and but it was a lot of fun to write, and it was written, like I said, to be an audiobook first.
Why an audiobook first instead of print?
Well, for two reasons. One, because Audible paid me, and they were the publishers. They said, we want you to do this, and we want it to be audio first, and here's a bucket of money. And I was like, this is a compelling argument. I will do it this way. But secondly, actually, audiobook has really expanded, and it kind of exploded recently. It used to be that audiobooks were a shelf in the bookstore, and so it was very limited in terms of which books were made into audiobooks, and basically only the newest releases would be in audiobook. Now, thanks to the fact that so much of audiobook stuff is done online, you can have an entire backlist of books, just like you can have with the books in any other format. And this has been tremendous. I've seen my audiobook sales go from maybe like 1 or 2% of my income to now it's like 25-30%, because people can go back and not find just the most recent book, but all the previous books. So Audible is my audiobook publisher. They did a really good job with lock-in very recently, and they had asked me, would you be willing to do a audio first novella? And I was like, yeah, because I hadn't done that before. It was, I'm always interested in trying new things. And so I wrote it with in mind that the first time people were going to interact with it, they were going to hear it rather than read it. Now there is going to be a print version. It's going to be by Subterranean Press, and it'll come out 6 months after the release. But it'll be audio first, and it'll be very interesting to see how people approach that.
Right. You say you wrote it thinking, they're going to be hearing it, the audio first. How did you write differently? What were the things that you did?
One of the things that I learned listening to my books on audio was that I use dialogue tags a lot. So that would be tell us how audio works differently, Doug Dangler said. Well, John Scalzi said, blah, 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 blah. So the he said and she said. And when you're reading it, it's no problem to put he said and she said and he said and she said at the end of each sentence, because your brain eventually just skips over them. Right. Registers who it is that's talking, but you don't really read it in the same way that you actually read the sentence that precedes it. In audio, they have to say it, and you can't not hear it. So there are a lot of my books where you listen to it, and it's like, and I've had people say, "This is a great experience, but can you stop with the he said, she said, he said, she said."
So how do you get around that?
So what I do is I make sure that I get rid of the audio tags entirely unless they are specifically needed to identify particularly who is talking. So there are a lot fewer dialogue tags. And then when I do put them in, I use other ways of pointing out that someone else is talking. And this has been interesting because I think it's overall led to a slight improvement in my writing in general. Because the he said, she said, like I said, when you're reading it, it's not really a problem, so I didn't have to think about it before. But now it is something that I obviously have to think of. It's a small thing, but in terms of quality of life, in terms of listening, it makes a huge difference. So when I was writing for audio, I eliminated those. I made sure that all the words that I were using, I wasn't going to torture my narrator with them, which doesn't mean dumbing down the descriptions or dumbing down anything, but making sure that the words that you use are things that are easy to say. And that just makes a bit of a difference.
So you're not going to have things taking place in Quetzalcoatl?
No,
like
probably not. Although, again, if I were to have something take place there, I would make sure that I gave notes to the narrator saying, "This is how this is pronounced."
Now I'm wondering, did I say Quetzalcoatl?
Yeah,
correctly?
no. See, exactly. You've got word anxiety now.
Wow, of the many anxieties that I possess, I hadn't thought about that one before.
All the anxieties you have, that is the most recent.
Yes, that is the most recent.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So when you're writing for audio, as you were describing it, I was thinking all the audiobooks you hear, I sort of would have thought that somebody would go through and say, this is, they would alter the book in some way.
No, well,
but they don't.
Well, the thing is that they used to. My understanding is often they would make an adaptation or something like that. But people don't want their books abridged. They don't want the audio to differ from the printed version. Same with paperbacks. One of the things that you'll see at the back of some old paperbacks is not one word has been omitted from the hardcover edition.
I remember
because they wanted
yes.
to assure you that there wasn't going to be any difference. I had said to my audiobook publisher at one point, I was like, you can get rid of the dialogue tags and say this is the author's preferred audiobook edition. They're like, no, we can't do that.
Really?
Because people won't.
So there are people who must compare. If they're going to complain.
So there are a lot of people who will read the print version and then listen to the audiobook version, because the audiobook version is actually a different experience of it.
Yeah.
Listening to Will Wheaton narrate one of my books, or Tavia Gilbert, who did Zoe's Tale, as an example, is a manifestly different thing than whatever is going on in the theater of your mind when you read it.
Right.
And also some people just natively prefer the audiobook format. I get a lot of comments from folks who have said that they had never read my books because they just don't have time to read, but they put on audiobooks now when they're in the car during the commute or something like that, and it becomes I would much rather they listen to the book while they're driving than try to read while they're driving.
It cuts down on the number of
accidents.
You lose.
I don't want to lose anyone or cause them to make anybody else lose anybody else. So those are some of the things that I'm doing with audio. And then aside from The Dispatcher, I'm currently writing the upcoming book for tour, which will be out presumably in March of next year, and that's going to be a brand new space opera.
Right, and I think we had talked a while back, and you have 5 books in 5 years. You had a plan?
No, I have a contract with Tor, which I signed last year. It's 13 books in 10 years.
Oh, that's even worse.
I don't know about worse. The previous 10 years, 2005 to 2015, I wrote 19 books.
Wow.
Or I had 19 books published. So it's not that it's going to be particularly difficult. I mean, it actually means I'm writing fewer books. But what it means is that, I know for the next 10 years what I'm doing with my life, which is a great thing when you're a writer, because it's you usually don't have that luxury.
What's your word count per day? Can you sit down and say?
When I actually have a goal every day of, I sit down usually around 8 o'clock in the morning, and I write until noon. And I either write until noon and then I stop, or I write until I hit about 2,000 words and then I stop. So I can usually do about 2,000 words if I'm firing on all cylinders. And I don't make it exact. I mean, like some days I'll do 2,100, the next day I'll do 1,800, the next day I'll do 2,500, but 2,000 a day is usually my pace.
Do you have a reward for yourself when you hit the 2,000 besides stopping?
I was about to say, eventually I get a check.
Some people have more immediate rewards, like a bowl of chocolate ice cream.
Oh, no.
Or something like that, or you pet the cats for 5 minutes.
Sometimes I do the thing of you finish the book and you can get this thing. I very recently purchased a new camera, and I was going to wait until the book was done, but then I decided, no. I'm gonna get
immediate gratification.
Immediate gratification
is called that for a reason.
Right, exactly. And I'm not saying that anybody who does that is, that's not a good idea for them to do, but I've never been that sort of, do this and then you can have that sort of thing. For me, it's, as I'm going along, the closer I get, the faster I write, because I know where everything is and I just want to get finished. I mean, plot-wise,
right?
You work and work and work and work and work and work, and then your plot is as extended as it's going to get. And then everything comes together, and you know everything that's going to happen. And the greatest frustration you have is that you're not typing fast enough for the events that have already happened in your head. So it's like, just get it done, and then off you go. And what I usually do when I finish a book is then I sleep for a week, because the last couple of weeks of book writing can be really exhausting. But day to day, not a whole lot of
Does that go over well with the family? Where is he? The cats don't get fed. He's just sleeping off the latest book.
They are understanding at this point. And it is one of those things that I think at this point, my wife is like, yep, it's the last week. I won't see him because he's trying to get everything done. Now he's going to sleep for 3 days, and it's fine. I try to balance it out by otherwise generally being a good husband and father on a day-to-day basis, so they have no reasons to stab me in my sleep.
Wow. It's good that you go there.
This is a pro tip for everyone. Hey, if you don't want to be stabbed in your sleep, be a good spouse and or parent. Right. Yeah. That's. I'm not saying that it won't stop you from being stabbed in your sleep, but as a general correlation between being stabbed by a loved one,
right,
and being a decent husband and father, it's an inverse correlation there.
That's funny. It's
funny because you have all these stories about people being stabbed.
Because I have, one of the earlier interviews we did today, a man talked about the record for the most family members shot at one time was 11 by somebody in Ohio.
Again, why do I live in Ohio? It's for records like these.
For records like these.
That. You know what?
We have gone to a dark place.
So many awkward Thanksgivings right there.
That was my thought. That was a bad family reunion.
It was a bad reunion.
You should never have gotten those people together. That's
or you should have locked the guns away.
Right, yeah, there's one of the others. Well, John Scalzi, I thank you very much for talking to me today, and looking forward to the 13 books in 10 years that will be out on flying off the shelves and into the MP3 players. That sounds old, doesn't it? Into the cell phones of millions.
No, it's too late, you're old.
Yeah, well, I knew that. If I had hair, I wouldn't be old. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For more information from my guests, visit www.crafttheshow.com. This is Doug Dangler. Until next time, be creative.